planning and involvement in the Kramoja Iron Sheets case, bringing an end to the 2-year legal battle. Presiding Judge Justice Jane Kajuga formally terminated the proceedings after the Director of Public Prosecution entered a no prosequi, a legal notice signifying that the state's decision to discontinue prosecution. This is a matter of public interest. Discontinue without explanation to the public. In whose interest the DPP acts?
Well, that's a very important question, but one thing you must understand is that the DPP can actually withdraw a case at any stage as long as they've not finalized and the judgment has not been entered. And especially if the DPP does it, then they're doing it under what they call a Nolle prosequi. So they can actually enter what they call a Nolle prosequi. Nolle prosequi, in essence, means that we do not have substantive evidence sufficient enough to sustain this matter. And so they can do it based on what they have assessed and evaluated. Obviously, the question is, if you don't have substantive evidence, then why did you actually, procure these cases against this individual? But there are reasons, perhaps, why the DPP may actually withdraw a case before, especially entering what they call a Nolle prosequi. For example, if the witnesses are not there, or perhaps if there are substantive political, especially for the DPP, because remember the DPP acts as an entity on behalf of the government or on behalf of Uganda per se. But ideally, the DPP also has this bigger element of government in mind. Okay, so sometimes for political reasons, right political reasons, they may, they may do that, although it cannot come out in black and white. So that is something that is hidden behind, but they may do it because they are saying we don't have substantive evidence to procure this matter to its legal end, as it may be. So they may not have sufficient evidence. They may not. The state has lost interest, and they're not interested in it anymore. We don't have substantive, credible evidence that we can allude or perhaps procure in terms of dispensing this matter. Yes, but however, it is the DPP acts on behalf of the government. And the point you pointed out is that, aren't they liable, are they responsible, are they accountable to the people, the ordinary people, the people of Uganda, because the DPP acts on the people of Uganda, They are, especially when it comes to corruption cases, because corruption cases have an entity to do with moral turpitude and issues of accountability, yeah? So it is important that the DPP does furnish substantive reasons if they're actually entering a Nolle prosequi on behalf of an individual, especially in matters that have to do with corruption cases. So I agree with your question that yes, it is important that they do consult or they do furnish substantive reason and say, by the way, because of ABCD, we may not be able to procure this matter up to this logical conclusion because we have certain things that are missing. Yes.
Okay. The other one is, are there other openings for an appeal against the DPP laws of the interest in the case?
Now, ordinarily, there are no appeals against a Nolle prosequi. However, you can actually do what they call, you can apply for a judicial review at the High Court. So yes, they can actually apply for judicial review. Individuals may apply for judicial review, or perhaps certain entities that may be interested in terms of making an undertaking to try to understand why was a Nolle prosequi entered, and yet we feel, quote unquote, that perhaps there's substantive evidence to pursue this matter to logical conclusion.
Then what politics could be behind the withdrawal of these judges?
Now, one thing you must understand is that entities that have to do with senior officials, especially ministerial posts and the likes, political entities, there's always a political element behind that, So you cannot go and say, okay, this is the main reason why they're actually doing that. But you and I, you wake up and smell the coffee and know there is a rat smelling somewhere. So because of that bad stench, political stench that may have been not being well for certain individuals, they may actually do that in terms of that. Because at the end of the day, as we said, the DPP acts on behalf of the people, yes, but the DPP is appointed by the president, and we all know where that comes from. These are a function of the executive, which may pull strings left, right, and center. So yes, they can do it, but they have reasons perhaps that are more political than we know.
What's the likely fate of others?
Yes. Now, what happens that the writing is on the wall. Once you have actually withdrawn, entered the Nolle prosequi in light of perhaps the main, contestant in this particular aspect, or the main individual, then obviously these other people will begin to fall off one by one. You will begin to see those files that have not been filed or that within the pipeline, collapsing one by one. So fundamentally, we're actually losing the entire thing as far as this particular issue is concerned.
Does it remain fair for the others to be prosecuted when some have been forgiven?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because like I said, you cannot argue that this is a cognate and minor offense that has to trickle down to these other individuals. No, these are issues that have to deal with individuals that are, quote unquote, perhaps caught in the same boat, committing the same acts or omissions. So if you're withdrawing the act of omission on this particular entity, especially the big shots, then it has to trickle down to these people, rightly so. So justice, the law is about justice, but the law is also a moral question. So when you're arguing the morality of this, then you have to be understanding that when you're pursuing this matter, it is only fair, especially in aspects that have to do with corruption cases, that have to do with governance of sorts, that have to do with equitability of people's accountability in terms of their resources. Then you have to be hard from the word go. Otherwise, if you begin making it collapse, then you're going to make it collapse to when the big stone collapses. It's like removing the cornerstone away. Then the house is going to collapse. So it will be unfair for you to go to the smaller shots because the bigger shots have been taken away. I mean, justice should not be unfair in this concept.
Yeah. What is the likely fate of the whole Mabat files, knowing that some cases were never sanctioned?
Again, the writing is on the wall. In simple terms, it's going to collapse. If those guys, they've entered the Nolle prosequi, and we are saying these are the people who are red-handed, quote unquote red-handed, because we cannot allude until we actually, find them guilty. We operate under the presumption of innocence as a constitutional right, so we can't simply say that. But we know that perhaps these are the people who may have substantive evidence. Their affairs may be heavy. After all, the DPP actually found them, with a case to answer in the context of they are doing their investigative work, and they said there's a case to answer. Therefore, let's procure these offences against them. But now that we are taking them off one by one, we are losing the battle. You see, the question goes again to the moral question. As I said, law is not only a legal aspect, but also the moral question. The aspect of incriminating individuals who are found wanting in certain arenas, especially corruption, because corruption goes at the root of you and I as an individual. It affects everybody. It affects from the high top to the bottom. So fundamentally, it has a big lesson to this country. If we don't hold these people accountable, then we're going to cause a problem for ourselves substantially.
Thank you, Professor.
That is it.